Hello, BookTube. We're continuing on with my library tour. We're going to finish this up this week. As usual, I'm in the little book room now. I'm not out in the other room, but even so, I think I'm going to stick to the rhythm of not doing library tours on the weekends. Give you a little respite from this endless barrage of obscure books. So we'll finish up today. We're continuing on with this first tall, narrow bookcase, and let's just get started. The first one is transwise here. There are a couple that are transwise. Oh, fantastic. Okay, this is. It doesn't belong here, of course, but you're used to hearing that. Or if it does belong here, then everything like it belongs here, and they aren't. Everything like it is scattered all over the place. I will redo this room when I'm done with this library tour. This is by Charles Passage. This is the complete works of Horace. I had this forever and ever as a green trade paperback, and then found the hardcover. And this is, if you've been watching this channel for 8,000 videos, then you know that I have my major complaints with translated works, and especially translations from the classics. Especially in other words, just to give it a narrow focus, especially translated from languages that I know well enough to read in all of their nuance without a translation. So I suppose my problem was with translation just in general, because I'm sure that I'd feel that way for everything the more I got to know the language. Horace is one of my favorite authors, to put it mildly. I adore him, and I go back to him all the time, and almost never in English. But this is an English language translation of his works that I really like. I don't think it's in print anymore. I had my old trade paperback forever. And in this room, there are probably, I would say, 5 English Horaces, maybe 4. I know that I have at least 2 different Penguin Classic English language translations of Horace. And I'm sure that in this room somewhere I have the Loeb, which counts as a translation, even though Horace is right there on the page in the original. So they should all be together, is what I'm saying. When I redo this library, this little book room, all of the classics will be together. They won't be scattered all over the place. It's just pure laziness. I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. We have a limited amount of book space. Technically, that might not be as true elsewhere in Hyde Cottage, but in this little book room, the space is limited. So you have a limited amount of space, and there are books over every inch of it, and then you get a new book that you want to add to it, and you think, in order to do that, I would have to pull everything apart and shift everything over, so I'll just stick it here for now, and I'll get to it sometime. That's what accounts for the ramshackle nature of the books in this room. They did start out with a kind of scheme. But anyway, so that's the first thing, and that's very good. Because the Charles Passage translation of Horace is actually thought-provokingly good. So I go back to it. Not nearly as much as I go back to Horace himself, but I go back to the translation, especially when I'm looking at other translations. So what is this other Oh, okay. All right, this is a big illustrated version of Carl Sagan's great book, Pale Blue Dot. I have all of Sagan somewhere in this room. They, again, should all be together, but this is just further meditations of someone who was gone too soon. A handful of people I miss every day, and he's one of them. And this is a further handful of meditations about science, technology, planetary exploration, the nature of life on Earth, the nature of singularity. It's just wonderful. It's just wonderful. And this, I don't know that Pale Blue Dot ever came any other way. I think this is just the only way. This heavily illustrated version. Just very glad to have it. Let's see here. So those are the transverse books. And then what have we got here? This is boxed. Okay. All right. Well, this wasn't intended, but this is kind of a signal. It's kind of an example of what goes on in this room. 2 things just fell off the shelf. I don't know if you caught it on camera. I don't know if it came out on camera. 2 things just fell off the shelf. The first one was this box set. It's a thing called Pliny, a self-portrait, and it is someone who did this. It's a very nice volume. I think it might be for the Folio Society. Yes, it's for the Folio Society. It's The translation is by Betty Radis, the great Betty Radis, a staple, a foundation of Penguin Classics forever and ever. And what happens here is that the the title is meant to underscore the fact that in the letters of Pliny the Younger, he really does give us a portrait of himself. I mean, there are many books of letters. He collected them in his own lifetime. He was assiduous that way. And there's also an extra book that's absolutely invaluable for classical scholars, in which he collects his correspondence with the Emperor Trajan, to and fro. So there are Trajan's rather terse telegrammatic responses are in there as well. And all the rest of it, in all the other letters, Pliny recounts the people of his day, major and minor. He recounts the major gossip, the events in court, whatnot, but also all kinds of trivia. I think that's what this self-portrait comes from, is that it's all kinds of trivia. It really ends up being one of the most amazing portraits that we have from the classical world, straight from the person themselves. You could sort of compare it to the letters of Cicero. Certainly Pliny did. He very much wanted people to see it as that kind of a thing. And I guess that might be true. Certainly, like for instance, Penguin Classic has a few volumes of letters of Cicero. The letters to Atticus. Once upon a time, they had a 2-volume set of Cicero's letters to his friends. Cicero kept a lot of his correspondence, and because he was such an effortlessly beautiful prose stylist, a lot of those letters were kept and recopied, used as exercise books and whatnot. And Cicero is also fascinating in his personal letters. He talks about all kinds of things, not just the good and the mighty, and the pure and the perfect, and not just the cod philosophy that occupied so much of his leisure time. And Pliny is the same way, only he wasn't quite as insufferable as Cicero. He was insufferable, but he wasn't quite as insufferable as Cicero, and it comes out in his letters. His letters are even more enjoyable, I think, than Cicero's. And that was one of the things that fell off the shelf when I pulled this book out. And the other thing that fell off the shelf, wedged in between this book and the next book, was a $5 bill. Because that is this little book room in a nutshell. Who knows how much money I will encounter in the course of doing these books? Because I'm somewhat careless. I'm somewhat careless about money. I only truly care about books and dogs. And maybe Deb. Okay, so I'm going to tuck the $5 away. In fact, maybe I'll spend it at the Brattle, since it's here in the book room. Since I didn't know I had it, it's a pure windfall. Maybe I'll spend $5 at the Brattle. Wouldn't that be fun? See what I can get for $5 at the Brattle. Maybe I'll take you along. Maybe. I'm full of promises. So what is the next book? I don't know how much money will be falling out this time. Oh, great. Okay. This is a big old illustrated hardcover. The illustrations are by Phyllis Harrop of The Warden by Anthony Trollope. And don't let the boring cover fool you. The illustrations on the inside are delightful, just delightful. And this, I don't have any other Trollope that is anything like this, of course. But oh wow, oh my! It has an Avenue Victor Hugo bookshop bookmark. Avenue Victor Hugo was once upon a time a used bookstore here in Boston. Not no more. Look at that. That's lovely. How nice. I don't have any other Trollope in this, of course. I once toyed with the idea of finding great editions of every Trollope book, even if they weren't uniform. Of course, they wouldn't be uniform. But that's easier said than done. And there aren't a lot of great editions of a lot of them. I mean, for instance, I can only think of 2. There's this. I don't know that this ever was. I don't know this was part of the series. I don't know that there were other illustrated editions like this. And then there's also, was it Everyman's Library? Just a couple of years ago, did a new edition of The Duke's Children, my very favorite Anthony Trollope novel, in which they combed through the original drafts, the original stuff of the book, which turns out to be much longer than the thing that was made into a book when Trollope had to do that. His publishers just told him, cut X number of thousands of words, and he did. But because he was such a full-bore, meticulous writer, he cut parts of a sentence here, parts of a sentence there, parts of a paragraph here, parts of a paragraph there. And so it took a lot of work to restore all of that and make a complete Duke's Children. I myself didn't notice a whole lot of improvement. I mean, of course, I was happy to reread it, and I was happy to read parts of it that I'd never read before, but they were little bits and pieces. Trollope's, he was not only a meticulous self-editor, but also a consummately good one. So you could have asked him to take out 50,000 words, and he would have done it with, and the finished product would still have seemed completely smooth. It wouldn't have seemed like it was hacked or edited at all. And that's what the Duke's Children, just the normal version that we all read, has always felt like to me. It never felt to me like it was missing anything. But then that was my original plan, was come up with these idiosyncratic, wonderful, one-off editions of Trollope, and I turned out it's too much bother. I love the books too much to bother with that. I'll get Penguin Classics of all the ones that they made. I'll get the Oxford Classics all back again, and that'll be fine. Fantastic. Oh, great. Okay, this is this is the Glorious Williams book. It doesn't have a dust jacket. This is a collection of the New Yorker cartoons of Glorious Williams, and his New Yorker cartoons are incredible. They're amazing. He did spot illustrations for books of all kinds, but he also did these things. I don't know how you would describe them. They're narratives. They're stories told in one picture, just in one picture, and you just have to watch what's going on in that one picture, because a story unfolds. Many stories unfold in them. Let me see. Let me find you an example. What have we got here? Let me find you. Let me. These are so good. Let me find you. Yes, here we go. Okay, this is one. He's done a couple of that are classic that are reprinted all the time. This one is the caption is President Coolidge refuses point blank to vacate the White House until his other rubber is found. And if you can make it out, the stories are all the stuff that's happening. It's not just President Coolidge waiting for his second galoshes with all of his baggage packed. It's all the stuff that's happening in the background as people fret and look for this other thing, so that you can just lose yourself in it. And that goes all throughout this book. Oh boy, oh boy. Says this is he always calls them industrial crises, a lot of these things. The caption for this one is consternation at Heinz's when an inventory count reveals they have been manufacturing 58 varieties for years. And there you have people checking the books, the guy up on a ladder checking the shelf after shelf of Heinz ketchup, because they've only ever had 57 varieties of Heinz ketchup. And now it turns out they've actually been selling 58 varieties all this time. You've got all these people he's counting on his fingers. I just think they're adorable. Absolutely adorable. Although, this is not the perfect example. All the New Yorker stuff should be together. I have plenty of it. It would fill a shelf of a bookcase, and it's not altogether, so it should be. Okay, what is next here? Oh my, oh goodness. Oh, this is the Savage Sword of Conan, the Marvel Years, Omnibus, Volume 1. Look at that, huh? This is the Marvel Comics did 50 years ago. They did Conan the Barbarian, a classic 4-color comic book, and they also did a black and white, larger size magazine that could go on newsstands. It was more violent, more suggestive, and some of the stories in it are fantastic. I think per capita, it's better than the run on Conan the Barbarian, of course. And when I was buying those things and loving them, it never occurred to me that there would ever be a time when anybody would bother to collect them in a hardcover, much less collect them all. Marvel is collecting all of these. In fact, Savage Sword of Conan Omnibus Volume 2 is actually out. I just haven't bothered to go online and get it. They are, Marvel, for reasons that pass my understanding, will not send me review copies of these things. they won't even seem to acknowledge that they're getting my requests. So I guess they don't care about reviewers for a general audience. But the price tag that they put on them is a little bit extortionate. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into these. These volumes are incredible. You get not only all of the reprints, but also all of the letters pages, all of the extra features, everything. They reprint everything, and it's all been cleaned up, so it doesn't look bad at all. So I imagine that it warrants a cover price, but a cover price of $125 for something like this is a little bit much when you know that comic book discount websites, including some that Marvel perfectly participates in, it's not like they're being scalped, and also used copies will show up in new condition for half that or less in no time at all. And I'm sure that has happened with Savage Sword of Conan Volume 2. I haven't looked around. This video will be a little kick in the pants to get it, because these are omnibus editions that I very much want. I have been over this Savage Sword of Conan volume many times. Volume 2, at least. I mean, Savage Sword of Conan went on forever and ever. Marvel will probably end up doing 10 of these omnibus volumes. That's how many issues there were. They went on forever and ever, and they weren't always good. They got worse as they went along. But at least the first 2 whole omnibus volumes will be fine by me. So I'll have to remember to do that. I will have to remember to do something with this, since it's been sitting on this shelf for who knows how long, hidden between 2 books, and also get the second omnibus, the second Savage Sword of Conan omnibus for $50, $40, something like that. Okay, all right. And then we'll finish out the shelf with 3 books in a series that I have recommended many, many times. I cannot recommend it strongly enough. You would love it. And it's October, so it fits in season. This is Kim Newman's great Anno Dracula. In these beautiful trade paperback editions by Titan Books. We have Anno Dracula, we have Bloody Red Baron, and we have Dracula Cha-Cha-Cha. The only one I don't have is the 4th one, Johnny Alucard. I don't have that in this edition. I wish I did. That's another thing I should probably look for, because I know that I would want it. And those of you who might not have heard me enthuse about this, the genius of this series is its original conceit, I think. It's beautifully written, fantastically done. But the original conceit is just genius. Newman's idea is that Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, in which a centuries-old Carpathian vampire named Dracula ships coffins full of dirt containing vampires, containing his native soil and himself buried in that dirt, to England, to Carfax Abbey, in an attempt, it's not made as clear as Stoker could have made it in Dracula, in an attempt to get a toehold in England in order to flood the country with the undead. Dracula is starting to do this even before he makes landfall. And once he gets to England, he starts in earnest to convert people into vampires, and is thwarted by Abraham Van Helsing and by his group of muscular teenagers who not only thwart Dracula and drive him from England, but then chase him back home to Castle Dracula and kill him. And the conceit of Kim Newman's first book is that Bram Stoker's book is fantasy. Not because it invented vampires, but because it has Dracula lose. It's a what-if novel written by Bram Stoker to thrill his audience with what would have happened if Dracula had lost. But in reality, Dracula won and populated the country with vampires, and also became the consort of Queen Victoria and is the prince consort of England. And that's the mise en scene. That is the beginning of this book. That's where we plop our way in, is that there are vampires all throughout England. There are normal people all throughout England. It's kind of a police state. There's rumored to be a concentration camp at Dartmoor. And all of the Victorian world, including lots of Victorian people that we know, authors and fictional characters, are just living in this world where there are some half vampires, there are some odd fugitive bloodlines, and one of our main characters, I don't know if you can make her name out here, yeah, Genevieve, it turns out there are a handful of vampire bloodlines in the world, pure, strong, ancient vampire bloodlines. She is actually older than Dracula, more powerful than him in a lot of ways, and her bloodline is completely separate from his, and she's one of our major characters, but there are a bunch of others, including Victorian era characters that you know. So this is not only a perfect read for October and Halloween, it's also a perfect read for Victober. The first one is Anno Dracula is a perfect read for Victober, and then it moves on. Bloody Red Baron takes the story into World War One, and then Dracula Cha 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 takes the story into La Dolce Vita 1950s Italy, and they are just fantastic, just fantastic reading. And so is Johnny Alucard. I had my problems with Johnny Alucard, but I should definitely go on Titan's website and get that trade paperback to finish off this set. I really should. And I think I heard a rumor from one of you that there's another book in the series coming out. So this library tour is also a kick in the keister for me to get to work and start figuring out what I'm doing here. So anyway, there you go. That is this next shelf in this library tour. That's going to finish up for this week. I may have been overly optimistic about getting this whole room done in a month. If I don't want these library tour videos to be 45, 50 minutes long, and I kind of don't, because they're a massive headache to upload. You people are all the nicest people in the world. You're constantly telling me in emails and in messages that you don't mind a 40 or 50 minute video from me. And that's wonderful, and that warms the cockles of my transplanted rhesus monkey heart. But a video that big is a pain in the neck when you've got a crappy Wi-Fi, a crappy system. So I'm gonna, if I don't do that, if I keep myself to one shelf at a time, we might go over October. We might be doing this into November, but that's all right. You don't seem to mind. So I'm gonna wrap this up for now, and we will resume my library tour on Monday. We have a few more shelves left in this tall, thin bookcase. Who knows how much more money will rain down on my head. So I'll wrap this up, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.